What was always in me was creativity. I was always, well, two things. I've always been incredibly curious and I've always been really creative. Having uh, grown up undiagnosed, but knowing that you're, I don't know, maybe sometimes thinking you feel a bit crazy, um, maybe masking a lot of that growing up, and just feeling very full in my mind all the time.
Hello grown-ups, and welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up with me, your host, Sam Cooper-Gray. This week we have our first guest, who is based in Australia. Hailing from Melbourne, Pip Stocks describes herself as a hustler and a business builder. She is the CEO and founder at BrandHook, and we talk to her today about her passion to help young girls understand entrepreneurship and how she has turned channeling her creativity into her superpower. So please join me in welcoming Pip to the podcast. So Pip, tell me a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
So I'm a Melbourne girl. I went to school in Melbourne, studied in Melbourne. I ended up at Monash University studying a double degree in marketing and psychology. I actually didn't get into the degree to start with, so because I didn't get the marks in school that I wanted. So, and I keep telling my boys this, who are, one did a VCE last year and one's doing it this year. I had to go through the back door. So I got into another degree and then transferred up with a load of people who I became mates with, and none of us did as well as we wanted. So we all transferred into the degrees that we actually wanted. So that was great. But I loved uni. We had a great experience. I loved the way that I was taught. I was obviously interested in what I was doing, and there was a lot of projects. Um, I finished in 92, so those were the days where you couldn't get a job. So I went straight to London with a bunch of girlfriends. And we toured around for a year, and they all went home, and I ended up staying for 10 years. So it really was a very I suppose a very pivotal moment in my career working there, because I worked in advertising agencies. I got to work at Grey Advertising, working on all the Procter and Gamble business. And it was when Lafley was there the first time. So it became really, the conversation was all around the customer. So I really learnt my trade in those experiences. I launched Hugo Boss fragrances, Boss bottled fragrances, Hervé Leger, CoverGirl products. So I was all in the health and beauty department, which I loved. And I really practiced and learnt that ethnographic customer discovery process that I'm really passionate about. I ended up going to Virgin and doing a client stint, which I went to Virgin Energy. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a monumental failure. No one was ready for buying anything online. I mean, it was just too early, too far, way too early. And then I came home, started my own BrandHook business, which is a brand and customer experience consulting business. So taking all of that learning, built it into that business and that practice, scaled that up to 3 cities and 25 people, and then pivoted to tech. So that's sort of how I got into the startup world 4 years ago, by launching my own tech platform.
So if I take you back a little bit further, what was it that made you know, even though you didn't get on that degree, that's the degree that you wanted to do? Is that something was it always in you, or was there?
What was always in me was creativity. I was always, well, two things. I've always been incredibly curious and I've always been really creative. And I suppose the marketing side of that was more obvious.
Mhm.
And I suppose it was the late 80s when I finished school. So marketing was quite a trendy degree to do, and it was relatively new. And it was one of those degrees that if you were a little creative, it was encouraged. But the psychology side, I actually had a moment where I thought, I could actually go on and take the psychology route because of my curiosity and my interest in people. But then I realized I would probably just be a little bit, I'm not sure I would have been patient enough to hear everybody's problems. And I would have said after 5 minutes, okay, stop, I've got the answer. I know exactly what we need to do here.
So how did the psychology help though with the marketing side and the advertising?
Yeah, because it was all around customer psychology, understanding consumer behavior. That was what I specialized in. So again, it was, what makes people tick? What makes people tick in their life? What makes people tick when they choose products? And what are the systems and processes and thought, the conscious thoughts that they will go through when they buy something, and then what are the unconscious thoughts or the subconscious thoughts that might be going on that you can tap into as well.
So very successful career in kind of advertising and marketing. 10 years in the UK. What made you go home?
So I'd been married. My first husband is Irish, and we'd split up after 5 years. And I stayed and had a great time, and moved in with a great friend of mine, Melissa, and we had just a classic single girls apartment, and all the grey girls that we're still best friends with. We're on a WhatsApp group together, and we talk weekly. We would all spend a lot of time together. So it really was, do I stay here forever, actually? Because, this feels very comfortable for me. Or do I go home? It was that I was, sort of at that 31 mark. And my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I'm the sixth of a big family. So it felt like that was the trigger really to come home. So I was 50-50, but I did, yeah, that was really the moment I said, yeah, I think I'll go home.
And so, did you say you're sixth of a big
Number
family?
six. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you the baby then?
I'm the baby. Yeah, there's not many of us left though, but I am the baby. So yeah, number six. A big Catholic raised family. I mean, a great. We grew up, in the suburbs of Melbourne. It was fun. My brothers and sisters were a bit older than me, and but yeah, the wildness started at the top and certainly continued all the way through.
I feel like that might be something that we come back to. Um, I want to hear about your wild youth. So, so in advertising and marketing, then started your own brand company, really successful. What made you 4 years ago then pivot into tech?
I know. I suppose it's my brain, really. I mean, I get excited. I get really great dopamine hits from doing new things, and oh, that's new and shiny, and what's over here that's new and shiny. I suppose that's the creator side of who I am. Um, but I suppose really I saw a vision. I saw a vision. So we were working with CUB, who was one of our clients, Carlton and United Breweries, a big client of ours at the time, and they kept asking us to teach them how to have their own customer conversations, because they realised that the customer intimacy couldn't sit with us; it needed to sit with them.
Yeah.
And if they were truly going to be successful and strategic, they needed to own that customer and the intimacy of that comes with the conversation with customers. Anyway, so we started teaching them through workshops. We built, sort of templates. This is how you do it. We started to map this process out using like little cards, like cards that you would buy in a pack. Um, and then one day I just turned to Megan, who was a shareholder as well. I think this is a platform. I mean, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I feel like this is a platform. And so we did. I started investigating what that would look like and who could help us build it and what the cost of it might be. And so that took quite a bit of time. But we had the first version mapped out in the cards. Yeah, so I suppose it was more of a vision of what I realized it could be. I saw that, and then the need from a client asking us to deliver it.
So I love the idea of start. So many businesses come from that little acorn of an idea, don't they? Which is, I've seen a problem over here, but there is no obvious solution for it today. I'm going to go off and invent it, which I think is fantastic. So tell me your transition then from starting, that was Hearsay, wasn't it?
Yep.
To what you're doing now.
So Hearsay, we really had a crack. I mean, it was 4 years. We actually launched, it started as an app on your phone. And so the clients took the app to the face-to-face meetings with their customers. The first few experiments we did with CUB, they were in the pub with their customers talking about on tap cocktails. And it was great. It was really successful. And it was just before AI. So we were getting transcripts. They were, tapping what they thought was interesting, that it was appearing on the transcript. And then I don't know if you remember, but Melbourne or Victoria in Australia was locked down for almost 2 years in COVID. So we went into in March. We launched in February. In March of 2020, we went into COVID lockdown. So panic. After spending all of the 4 months before building out the product, was in retrospect, and I didn't see that. I didn't see the distribution. Well, because the meetings platforms at that time were terrible. I mean, I don't know if anyone remembers, but Zoom was terrible. Meets was terrible. Half the time you couldn't actually get on. So we dropped in video and turned it into a desktop. But at the same time, those meeting platforms were ramping up what they needed to do. And, they had $20 million and we didn't. We did get seed funding from a VC here in Melbourne, which was great. And that gave us a little bit of money to, at least maybe employ a couple of people, which we did. Again, looking back, I've actually got a document that says the 10 startup watch outs if you're starting a business, and this is one of them. You don't need to recruit people when you first start. You can actually hire people for the job. The Clayton Christensen almost thinking, hire someone for a job. They can come in and do a job for you, but you don't have to, in the beginning, hire a whole set of people. And we were very much encouraged to get a CTO on board, and we, employed the wrong CTO, and that was really the beginning of the end. But look, we ploughed through for another 18 months, but we'd lost momentum because of the tech, and we just were up against major players. So, but it was the best experience. I mean, I'm still sad about it. Like, I still feel that was like a real moment for us because I could see what it could have been. But I realized that, it was obviously it was what it was. And I learnt an incredible amount. In fact, it's made me a much better business person as a result, because it's a completely different business to running a consultancy. So I now feel like I've got that full spectrum of understanding business structures and how to get going.
And it's funny you say that, because I think one of the most consistent themes that I hear from entrepreneurs is you learn so much more from the stuff that doesn't quite make it than you do from the stuff that's super successful. And it is part of who you are now. And so you take everything you've learned and that builds into what you do next.
Yeah, that's right. Already as I'm starting to build out the Startup Muse platform and playbook, I'm doing things differently already in that way. So, it's a really difficult lesson. It's like a first husband. Your first tech startup's not meant to work.
So tell me a little bit about your new startup.
So the Startup Muse is really born out of, again, my own experience of being a startup founder, my frustration and internal rage at the inequity of funding for female founders globally. And even this year, the stats are looking worse than last year. And how could that possibly be? Again, with Hearsay, after our initial raise, I probably had 50 conversations with VCs here in Australia and couldn't raise any more money, which was heartbreaking for me because I could see it and I was so sad they couldn't see it. So the Startup Muse is anchoring into a very young female entrepreneur, like a tween, a teenage girl. And the statistics say that if women are exposed to entrepreneurial thinking at a very young age, they're more likely to start businesses, be great leaders, be more financially secure, and just be all round sort of have improved lives, an improved life. So I thought, well, instead of raging all the time on LinkedIn about this, I better do something about it. And where can I start? Well, I'll start where I know, because I was that 11-year-old girl. I was that girl that was, hugely creative and very joyful and always, designing outfits that my mum would sew for me or writing stories or creating plays with my cousins. I drew faces on paper and did different makeup looks. Like I was always just tinkering away at things. And if so, I want these girls to understand the business playbook. How do you start a business? Well, you start something with passion. You find a pain point. You look at a solution. Let's prototype that up. Let's work on some communications. Let's talk to your customers. So it really does take them through almost like a traditional accelerator program. So that's the playbook, and the platform is really anchoring into AI with AI mentors. AI agents are building ideas in the background while the girls are creating with the mentors. So yeah, I feel it really excites me, and I know that the vision is to change this dire number by creating founders, teaching girls at a young age, creating founders, female founders who can start businesses but invest as well. And that's the key. We need to all grow this ecosystem and community so that they can be investing in each other, and we can just change these numbers and get products and services out that really suit us as women.
Yeah, absolutely. We did. I saw a piece of research recently that says that women are much more likely to start businesses that solve a problem for other women.
Mm. Yeah.
So they're actually creating the entire new industries
Yeah.
because they see those challenges and they're like, oh, I can just like you did. You saw a gap and like, oh, I can solve this problem. But they're much more likely to do that for a problem that obviously they've experienced and other women experience. So it's like a whole
Yeah.
new set of industries, which I think is so empowering. And as you say, the earlier we start to help them understand that journey, the more confidence you give them as they get older. So amazing, amazing. And great to see that. Just interesting to see your journey through from, working for a kind of quite big corporate agency, then going business side, then, and I'm going to come back to this, I think, then coming home and going, I'm just going to start my own agency because I want to hear a bit more about that. Because for most people, that's quite a leap from having had a salary to starting your own business. I'm really interested as to where that came from. But tell me, and you've shared a kind of, the struggles with getting Hearsay off the ground and the complete sideswipe from COVID, which I think impacted a lot of small businesses and startups. What would you say has been the biggest struggle you've had to experience during your journey?
This is where I feel like I might be having a counselling session, Sam. I suppose there's two things that really shaped me. One was my brother died when I was a baby, Jamie, really tragically, actually. And so, again, youngest of six, he was number five. And that really shifted the trajectory of our family. I mean, it changes everybody's experience with their parents because our parents were, mourning and terribly sad. It sort of changes the relationship with each other. I mean, interestingly, we are all those that have left. I've also had a sister who's passed away. There's just been a lot of death in our family and trauma. Both my parents aren't here anymore. So I think dealing with that trauma at a young age and then grief ongoing that's been really interesting. I mean, I've been someone that's always wanted to talk a lot about it, but these were the 70s, so no one talked about the death of a child then. There was no family counselling. It was, every person for themselves, really. So, yeah, you can see that the effect that that would have on a family. And we actually have a very close family, so we're lucky for that. But that's probably one thing that's really affected all of us in probably ways that we don't really talk about even now. I mean, we like to laugh and be silly, but we don't necessarily, always get into the deep stuff. And I suppose the other thing that's really is I'm a late diagnosed ADHD woman. So having grown up undiagnosed, but knowing that you're, I don't know, maybe sometimes thinking you feel a bit crazy, um, maybe masking a lot of that growing up, and just feeling very full in my mind all the time. Um, and I suppose I have a bit of a complicated relationship with that, in that I know that it's great for my amazing magical brain. Like, I know that I wouldn't be able to have created the things I have, like the books I've created or the strategies I've created for other people or the businesses I've built. I wouldn't have been able to do those things if I'd not had the brain I had. But I also think that it did, it came with a lot of trials and tribulations, trials. So, it was, it is a harder journey, particularly if you don't know. Like, no one
Yeah.
talked about that either. It's a recent, everyone talks about it now, but no one
Yeah.
talked about it then. So I suppose they were the two things that personally have shaped who I am today.
Yeah, I bet. And I think having that grief and that trauma at such a young age, must have, it carries with you, doesn't it? And it carries with your family. As you say, if you don't talk about it, I think we talk about this stuff more nowadays than we used to.
Mm.
And then you overlay that with a undiagnosed ADHD, where, you don't concentrate in the same way, you express yourself slightly differently, and you feel different when you probably already felt different, must have been really challenging.
Yeah, and I suppose because you don't know that that's what it is,
Mm.
you don't really understand it. And you probably, like, I've had people sometimes call me inconsistent, and I would be really hurt by that, because I don't think I am inconsistent, but sometimes I might present full of life, and other times I might just be a bit more, sort of smooth, I would call it. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe that's inconsistent. But I suppose, had you grown up with, like, one of my boys, maybe both of them actually, but definitely one, was diagnosed with ADHD when he was very young. He's grown up knowing that he's got this magical brain. So anytime that he feels something, and I'm always sending him Instagrams and TikToks to the family app, like, oh, look at this one. Oh, yeah, this is why you're doing this, and this is what's happening here. Like, it's not a secret, it's not a surprise. He can take the information and digest it himself and understand, his own behavior and his own thought processes. We didn't have the luxury of that, so
No.
I didn't know, really. I mean, and then it wasn't until Christian was diagnosed, and then I went through menopause, or in menopause, that it became really obvious to me. And
Mm.
then the conversation over the last 5 years, it's just been a lot of free. It's brought me a sense of freedom, and so I think getting over the grief bit of it was part of the experience. But then it also has given me some freedom. I don't really talk about it very often, actually, unless someone asks me. Um, like, when I got diagnosed, I didn't run around and tell everybody, not for any other reason other than I did it really for myself. But if
Mm.
people ask me, I'm very happy to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think it's quite common in entrepreneurs as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's
Um,
like in 32% or something. It's like, yeah. When I look back, and I, you know, all the things and all the, just even if you look at just the moments, irrespective of how you felt about anything, but if you just look at some of the things, you go, oh, really? Okay.
yeah,
Why didn't anyone
yeah,
talk to
yeah,
me about this earlier? I
yeah,
even think, within my own family, I mean, my sister and I joke about it. I see another great nephew pop out of my nieces and nephews, and I go, oh, yeah, that's one, that one's one of us.
And I think it's more common in women than we think. I was definitely one of those kids who sit me in a classroom all day and I was so bored I couldn't concentrate. Give me
Oh,
something
so
to
bored.
do and I would learn really quickly. And as you say, I mean, I've never been diagnosed, but I've got a lot of female friends now who have been diagnosed later with ADHD, and it is that kind of active brain wanting to do stuff, but needing to kind of retreat and recover and then go again. And again, I
Mm.
think a very common theme for entrepreneurs, people who want to run their own businesses, who think slightly differently or creative. So with all of those, that life experience, and obviously some of that trauma that you've experienced, and the highs and lows of running your own business and living in another country, that's also another theme I see on the podcast, actually, is people going off and experiencing another country. What's the best decision you've ever made?
Uh, I mean, I think coming home, not I think, coming home was a great decision at that time. Going there was great. I mean, I had the best 10 years. I feel like it was like another lifetime ago, and I've got really strong friendships with amazing women, particularly, in London, and stories, great stories that we regale all the time when we see each other, or even, we even on uh, online we catch up. Um, but coming home was the right decision for me. I can see. I mean, my now husband, he's from Finland. We met just before I left, so he ended up coming here. Uh, that was 21 years ago now. And raising the boys here, was definitely the right thing to do. I mean, when I first got home, I felt it really took me a while to get back into Melbourne.
Mm.
It did, after living in London. It felt smaller, and we didn't have such connection like we have now. But the boys have had a great experience. They've got great friends. They've got dual citizenship, so they can go to Europe, when they're ready. So I feel like that was a really good decision to make. And um, being with my family, and,
Mm.
I've got all these, like, not just the six children, but I've got 14 nieces and nephews, and now something like 18 great nieces and nephews. And so just being able to spend time with my family and old friends and new friends, and so that was definitely the right decision. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I'd stayed in London, actually. And that's not, I mean, we do plan to move back over to Europe at some point when the kids are a bit more, progressed in their uni life
Mm.
or work life. But it was the right thing to do to come home.
Amazing. And I think that that's quite a big formative, like leaving was a big formative decision, coming back as well. And timing
Yeah.
that also with starting your own business, that's a big life change.
Well, I had to move back in with my parents, so that was hilarious. Back out to my old bedroom. So I did that for about 6 months, and then did a little bit more travel, and then came home and bought an apartment, close to the city. So
Yeah.
Arto, who's my husband, had a cool, funky pad to move to when he came here, and all my friends were around. My old friends were around that same area. So yeah, it was good.
Brilliant. And we talk on the podcast a lot about the advice that we get and we give, and the bits you've listened to and you haven't. What's the best piece of advice that you've been given that you ignored?
There's probably quite a few. I can't remember. There is something. The first thing that came to my mind when I thought about this question was um, something that I felt uncomfortable with, which I think is interesting, which is why I didn't do it. But a new colleague, a new colleague, work colleague, 10 years ago said to me, I was asking her how she had ran her own business, and I was asking her about how she was building up her client list. And she said that at the beginning of each year, she decides who she wants to connect with that year, and she puts strategies in place to do that. And even though I'm highly strategic when it comes to business and brands, it made me feel uncomfortable to be strategic with people. And it probably shouldn't shouldn't I probably shouldn't feel like that because
Yeah.
that's how the world goes round, right? And I know that, in more corporate environments, there's probably, I suppose, politics is something that people have to play. I'm not,
Mm.
I'm not interested in that either. But I suppose it just sat. I think it was actually good advice, but maybe the implementation of it felt a bit contrived. Not what That's not the right word, is it? But it didn't feel authentic. And
Yeah.
so I don't know how you do that in an authentic way, because I really do feel like I need to connect with someone to want to build a relationship with them. So I can't connect. I found it hard to. So I know that that person would be really good for my business or my career, but I think they're an ass. So, you know, that didn't work for me. So I didn't do it. I can see that it would work for people, and I think she's grown a very successful business off the back of that thought process.
Mm.
But to me, it just felt disingenuous.
Yeah. No, I understand that. One of the things that I am and I believe in for me, rather than for other people, is I network with people I like. And that means there are people I probably don't network with, because actually I want to network with people and do business with people who I feel a real connection with, rather than just
Mm.
because they're in a position that can help me, which probably isn't the best advice to give to someone, but fits with how I feel. And it sounds for you very similar, which is I want to work with people and be inspired by people who I like and I get on with, not just anybody who can help my business.
Yeah, it's true. And even I went for a walk with a girlfriend recently who's got a big job, and she's probably somewhere that doesn't fit with her values, and but she's plowing through for the sort of bigger opportunity that it will provide to her. I just couldn't do that. I mean, I have left jobs or I have changed things
Mm.
up when things don't feel aligned to my values. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't really know where I sit with it at the end of the day, other than feeling like, I genuinely need to be with people who I like and I enjoy and inspire me through good conversation or humor or silliness. They're the things I like.
So I think that takes us really nicely to the next question, which is, what is the personal challenge that you would set our listeners?
Oh, yeah, I like this one. Again, there would be two things I would. One's a bit of a personal ask challenge to people. The first one is definitely go out and search out female-founded businesses. Uh, I've had a lot of conversations over the last 18 months with female founders and who are creating amazing things, but just don't get the same exposure because they're
Mm.
not doing the. I suppose I talk about it being bravado. They're not launching with bravado. They're not speaking about what they're doing with bravado. And it's not that they don't believe that it's amazing. They do believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but it just doesn't feel like a very female trait. And look, and as a contrast, the boys are doing that. They do, and we know that when
Yeah.
men apply for jobs, they only have 65% of it, and we think we have to have 98% of the criteria. And so we know that that's all real stats, right? But I mean, hats off to these blokes. If they can do
Yeah.
that and have that self belief, then that's what we need to be. We don't need to be men, but we need to be more confident and full of developing our self belief. So the challenge is for anyone in the audience who wants to invest money and wants to explore with startup investment to actually look for female founded businesses, and they're going to be harder to find. But there'll be people in your network that know, oh, yeah, I've heard of this woman that's doing something amazing. Oh, you should talk to her. Go and search out those businesses as opposed to just um, sticking with the ones that are more obvious in your face. Go and explore those ones to invest. And just, even if you're not used to investing, just a little bit of money, $1,000 or €1,000 or £1,000 or whatever it is that you can spare, just start somewhere. And it will be it's a very enjoyable experience, because not only are you seeing the business thrive as a result of your contribution, you're actually part of it.
Yeah, and I think just thinking about female-led business as part of the journey to understanding all the businesses that exist and the things they might be bringing is a really big piece. I love that as a personal challenge. Did you say you had another one as well?
Well, mine was just if anyone knows Sarah Blakely or Serena Williams to make it get, I want to go and meet them and pitch the Startup Muse to any of these, any female billionaire I'm open to because, we need to get this funded. So if anyone has a connection and I can get into the diary, I'm on a plane and I'm meeting them. So that's
Excellent. We'll see what our listeners can come up with. I'm not sure. I'm not sure my following has that sort of power, but if it does, I'll be very impressed, and
I don't
we're
know,
happy to use it for good.
7 degrees of separation. There'll be somebody.
And the final question, I can't believe we've got to actually. Before I do the final question, I'm going to come back to another question that I'm really interested to hear from you, which is what made you start your own business? Because we touched on that earlier when you came back from being in the UK. I'm really interested into what, and I, it sounds like from your story there was always something in there around the creative, but starting your own business is a big leap when you've only ever worked for someone else. So just very quickly before we get to the final advice piece, what was it that made you want to start your own business?
I just was never very good at working for people, I think, really. Like I had one of my great bosses at Grey, Suzanne, who, oh no, actually she was no, not at Grey. She was at a smaller agency I was at before I went to Grey. She always said that she thought I'd start my own business because I'm not very good at authority. Yeah, I really have to admire someone to feel, and I really have to see that they're doing something amazing I don't know if it's appreciate, just to, um, it sounds a bit wanky, but to work for someone, I've worked for a lot of people, and most of them I felt like weren't that good, and that's not doesn't sound like a nice thing to say, but it's true. Like, but that I did have amazing bosses that I thought were amazing and taught me a lot, but overall I felt like I could do this myself. I really felt like I'm just going to do this myself because I don't agree with where you're taking this or me or my experience or the brand or the business. So I'm just going to build my own and I want to have control and power over creating something on my own. Um, yeah. And because I wasn't good at authority, I mean, no one loved this, no one loved it less than the CEO when I treated him, because they were often hymns, and the office cleaner in exactly the same way, because I just don't have a sense of authority like that. Like, yeah. So I don't know if that feels a bit jumbled in what I'm saying, but
No, I think it's really interesting. I think it's a very common theme for entrepreneurs that just actually, unless and I feel this, unless you've got a boss who inspires you, it's really hard to work really hard.
yeah,
Unless you're doing something you're really passionate about. And a lot of the people I interview are like, well, if I'm passionate about it, I might as well just go and do it myself.
yeah,
And have that kind of, especially I think when you've got some creativity in you, when your brain works in that kind of ADHD way, actually that probably sets you up perfectly to be an entrepreneur rather than an employee because you have those highs and lows in a completely different way to other people.
and I think you see things like one of the things that I've always been able to do, even when I'm looking at, if I'm we do a lot of the work at BrandHook is anchored in the customer and the customer's opinions, and so we go and spend time in their homes and their cupboards and looking at things and asking them questions. So when you come back, you've got this huge amount of data that you need to make sense of, and I've always been really great at seeing that data and saying, that's important, that's important, that's important. That's the strategy. Let's draw those things out and use the rest of this to support that, because that's it.
Mm.
And so seeing things, differently, or I don't want to say ahead of time, but in a sense, sort of, can see the vision for
Yeah.
what those things might be, And so when you're working for someone who can't see that, I've always found that really frustrating. And I've had a couple of bosses that could see it and were, quite creative thinkers, but most people aren't. So I thought, well, I'm actually just gonna hate everybody and they're all gonna hate me. So
So I'm better
let's
off doing it on
just
my own.
just do something myself. Yeah.
I love that. I think there are much worse reasons to go into business for yourself. Is like I don't want to hate everyone I work with. I'm just going to go do it myself. I love it.
Yeah.
So to that final question then, what advice would you put into the guide if it exists? What's your one thing that so far in your lived experience you think is the most useful thing that other people could benefit from?
I've spent a lot of time on this over the last few years as well. It really is shifting your mind from that limiting space of, this is what life has given me, as opposed to realizing that we are all creators of our own life and we make things happen for ourselves. And um, flipping a frustration to self belief. I mean, I've been reading a lot about neuroscience. I'm just reading Mind Magic by James Doddy at the moment. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. But it also, anchors into it's layered with a lot of spiritual practices as well. And I just love that combination. I love the scientific approach of this is how our brain works, but I also like the kind of magic of the creating. You can create a business, you can create a life, you can create all these things. It really is genuinely up to you. And so if you can understand how your brain works, you can actually easily make that happen. We spend a lot of time as humans making things difficult for ourselves. And, so it's removing all of those limits and really just sitting in a space where you feel good. I know it's easy to say feel good about yourself. I know that's a journey, and I've been on that, so
Mm-hmm.
I feel like and look, I'm not always 100% there. Like I have moments, the boys see me have a moment recently. I felt, that was sort of felt very sad about something, but it genuinely, my advice is really focus on your self belief and the fact, and know that you can actually create a life that you want. That's not anchored in anything limiting. That you are much more expansive than you actually know.
Well, I'm not sure I can add to that because I think that was the perfect way to end the pod. So, Pip, thank you so much for joining us today. I know the listeners are going to really enjoy. We'll see if someone can connect you to Serena or someone else.
Serena with Sarah Blakely, the Obamas.
We'll put a list in the bio.
Yeah, I've
Who
got a
are the
top
people that
10.
would be helpful? Yeah. So thank you so
Yeah,
much. I've really enjoyed today. And I know our listeners will really enjoy hearing your journey.
thanks, Sam.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please do like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch or listen. Next week, we have with us the fabulous Lee Chambers, and we talk all things male allyship, his experience of growing up as a young black lad in the UK, and what he's learned about the importance of mental health. So join us next week. And in the meantime, enjoy being a grown up.